What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to do some in-depth technical analysis and break down what the technicals are telling us about Tesla. I'm going to break down the earnings that came out and how they affected the markets and also Tesla, and also the big piece of news that actually caused Tesla to come down pretty hard, to gap down the way it did and actually bounce. I'm going to break down the news, the technicals, and what the data tells us about Tesla. But before I break anything down about this stock and anything in this video, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money to the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just 3 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Tesla's down 0.94% for the day. But if I put this side by side with the SPY, you will notice something very interesting. And whether you do this with SPY or the QQQ, it does not matter. The same trend is evident, and that is, when you look at the SPY, we gapped down. So did Tesla. But then Tesla dropped down even harder compared to SPY. Then SPY bounces and fills its gap. Tesla tries, it basically struggles to do that. And then SPY just takes off, and this thing goes flying to the upside. It didn't just fill the gap, it just kept going. Whereas Tesla failed to actually fill its gap, came just short. So as you could see, there's some relative weakness here. And I'm going to show you exactly why this happened and what this now tells us about the future for Tesla. So to start us off, why did the whole market gap down, right? I showed you guys SPY gapped down, so did Tesla. That's because of some big news that came out from big banks. So earnings came out, but the earnings were actually quite awesome. I mean, the truth is Bank of America actually beat on their earnings overall. So did BlackRock, so did JP Morgan Chase, so did Wells Fargo. And I think a lot of people were expecting them to miss. The big recession is here. They're supposed to do horrible. We actually saw them beat, with the exception, I think, was just one company. Like, just one of them kind of missed on their revenue. But besides that, for the most part, they beat. They did relatively well. But the problem is, the banks are telling everyone that, look, maybe we're doing well right now, but we expect a mild recession, and we are preparing for the worst. So the banks are telling us it wasn't just Bank of America, it was also Wells Fargo and also JP Morgan Chase saying the exact same thing. They expect a recession, and the market did not like this. We do not like the word recession, as the whole market kind of contracts, and this does affect everyone. Everyone, no matter how rich or poor you are, you will be affected by this. So this is super important because the market has never bottomed before a recession, or at least almost never. And there's likely going to be more red to come in the markets because of this. Now, I also want to note that earnings season has just kicked off. So we also have Netflix announcing their earnings next week. Tesla's earnings is going to be in about a little bit under 2 weeks, on the 25th of January. We also have Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, AMD, and Google or Alphabet, and all these big companies over the next couple of weeks. Over the next like 2 to 2.5 weeks, they will be announcing their earnings. It's going to be very important. We have more banks on Monday, especially. Now, this explains why the market gapped down. This explains why under the SPY came down and Tesla as well. But the real question is, okay, yes, they both basically gapped down, but why did Tesla really underperform? Why did Tesla not do as well and not recover as well? Well, I believe that the first thing you have to remember is the fact that historically, Tesla has been a little bit weaker than SPY and also the overall market. Tesla is still showing some weakness. This is often because of bad news. We keep getting hit by more and more bad news. It's slowly just causing the stock to just underperform again and again. But what tends to happen is it doesn't necessarily crash. It's more like it just chops back and forth. And if this trend continues, it's very likely that this will continue again. If we keep getting hit by bad news, Tesla's likely going to just chop more than the overall market. So it's very important to just be prepared for that. Now, why did Tesla come down pretty hard and actually hit this supply, not supply, this support zone that I actually have highlighted, and that's because of some other big piece of news. Tesla has drastically lowered their prices again. And remember, not too long ago, I told you guys they did this in China. They lowered their Chinese prices because of the fact that demand is slipping over there, right? People are saving money at a much higher rates than before. Not the best time for them, ideally. And as this is happening, we're now seeing the trend spread to the USA and Europe. This is because of the fact that there's obviously relatively high supply, but the demand is just dropping. It's not as strong as before, and they're now lowering prices to incentivize more people to buy more. This also allows many of their Model Ys, I believe, to actually make it and qualify for a federal tax credit. So that's once again, it does benefit them to some degree. I do believe they're making the right move, but this is actually telling us something else for the EV sector that a lot of investors don't like. Now, for the specific details, I want to note that the Model 3 is actually going to be cut by 6%. We have the old price, the new price, the difference, 6% drop, 14% drop for the Model 3 Performance, 20% drop in price for the Model Y. This is specifically, obviously, there are some differences in every single country, but this is generally, I think, for the USA. We're seeing the Model S cut by 10%. All right, another 15% for the Model S Plaid. It's just insane, guys. This has to happen though, because Tesla has to do something to incentivize more and more people to buy amidst these hard times. I also want to note that the backlog in orders in Tesla is continuing to get, I think it's continuing to get smaller, and it's not the best of things, right? Tesla needs to like really, really, really hold on strong. I really believe they will, but they know they have to make big adjustments during times like this. Now, I also want to note that Elon Musk retweeted this tweet right over here, and I'm going to talk about this to remind you that even though Tesla is going through hard times, even though there's so much FUD out there, it's not the end of the world for the company. They still have all these little details that make these cars absolutely incredible. Now on Teslas, if you go into that Tesla app, you could view the charging history, the savings for the full year of 2022. If you guys want to do that, you could do that. This person right here spent about $1,500 to charge their Tesla. They have the total amount they used to charge it, and they actually saved over like $1,500 on if they would have used gas for the same amount of miles that they went, assuming other different factors. That still is a big amount of money that they saved, and it really shows why on earth many people are switching to Teslas. They also believe that, you know, the cars are just making a big difference for the world. And if you give this company the time it needs, I'm still very bullish. So, anyways, enough about the news. Let me talk about the technicals and how the stock is reacting. What I don't like, and one thing that is true, is the price price ratio has been dropping very hard. This tells us that Tesla is still looking relatively weak. It was trying to bounce, but it actually failed again. And I do expect this to kind of remain down here for a little bit of time. The market was green, but Tesla barely wasn't able to keep up. It was actually down almost 1%. Many analysts are still neutral. We actually have Citigroup that just came out yesterday. They're actually neutral on Tesla. It's very interesting to see. And there are still some buy ratings out there from even like Goldman Sachs. I do agree, and I believe that's a very, very good rating. I'm still very bullish. This is a very good price to buy in. And obviously, the market's going to be closed on Monday because of the Martin Luther King Jr. Day and commemorance of him and everything that he has done. And for Tuesday, that's when we're going to be back in action. Tesla's green about 50% of the time. I'm hoping for a green day. Really depends on earnings too. So now let's transition into the charts. What are the charts telling us about Tesla? I have some good news and also some bad news. The good news is we have different interpretations of the chart. You could argue that we have a potential inverse head and shoulders like formation. Maybe going into earnings, Tesla gets a bit of a pump. Maybe, right? That's just one possibility. Or what else could be happening is, Tesla could be right here. You could argue that there might be a head and shoulders forming right here. Right? We have the left shoulder, the right shoulder, the head. There are two different interpretations. And what I would say is you have to be able to invalidate over the other. If Tesla breaks down again and we actually fell at this trend line, this is 119, and we start going down, whether it's because of some bad piece of news, whether it's the market that causes that, that will likely kind of make this head and shoulders like formation more valid and make the inverse head and shoulders potentially forming like right here less valid if this thing gets a break all the way back down like this. Now, what else could happen is if Tesla is set to come down, that you could even argue that that's a part of this inverse head and shoulders. So maybe let me just show you. If we break down like this next week, hypothetically, I'm not saying we will. Well, what could happen is if we get a breakdown to like these levels, well, you have on this end the left shoulder, a head, maybe a right shoulder. And then on top of that, remember right here, I was saying that this could be a left shoulder, this could be like a head, and this could be a right shoulder. So we have like a head and shoulders that formed within the potential inverse head and shoulders. Pretty interesting stuff. So we might see a breakdown. It could actually happen because of some news or whatever. We also have the gap right here that could get filled. We could come down, forming the double bottom before we get a bit of a push to the upside from there. This is just a hypothetical situation though, so I can't really promise anything, but I just wanted to note that as a possibility because so far Tesla has been underperforming, but I don't expect it to crash like super hard as of right now. It's also going to depend heavily on earnings, so we have to actually wait for that. But I also want to break down something else that's worth noting, and that is what is SPY doing and how may this affect Tesla? I want to note that, yeah, the market's in a pretty decent place. Could you argue that we're resembling a cup and handle like formation? We actually had it like right here. The answer is yes. And are we done pumping? The answer is I don't think we're done just yet. I think there's more room to go up. We have a potential Elliott wave count that's forming. This could be like a 1, a 2, a 3. Could this drop be the 4 and then we're forming 5? Or could this whole move be the 4? We come down for I'm sorry, this whole move could be the 3. We come down for the 4 and then the 5 forms. I don't know for sure. But I will say one thing. The top may be between 398 and 402. It's very likely it is somewhere between there. We actually saw 399 today, and it looks like we do have more room to keep going. But that's just my prediction. If we end up breaking above it, which I think is less likely, above like 402 to 403, I think that's unlikely, but if it does happen, hey, we're still going to be prepared anyways. But like I said before, I think we're most likely going to get a rejection relatively soon because of these earnings. They may actually slow us down. Now, I want to note that on the daily, we actually have the RSI pointing towards a bearish divergence because right here, we're still seeing the same thing. The RSI was like at 58 when we actually hit 408, and now the RSI is at 61 almost. My point is SPY is more overbought right now in a way. This is just one way of interpreting it. We're more overbought at 398 right now than how overbought we were when we hit 408. That's one way you could interpret it. That is, in my opinion, a sign that the market might reverse soon. Maybe in another week or two, we could see a big reversal. Now, I also want to note something else that's worth noting, and that is on, let me see, on the daily, we also have that head and shoulders potentially forming right here. So I'd be very cautious when trading this. As you can see, we have a potential left shoulder, the head, maybe a right shoulder. In order for us to invalidate this, we have to like break way above. I don't know if that's going to happen, right? I'd be very careful. I also want to note that there was an instance where SPY came down pretty hard to about 385, and we rallied all the way back to like 408. So that was like a $20 rally before we saw a big reversal to the downside. So there are going to be fake outs like that, and you have to be very cautious. I also want to note that, sorry guys, I don't know what's going on. There's a big storm where I'm at. I don't know if I caught another cough again, but I'm completely fine. I apologize. But anyways, on the VIX, okay, on the VIX, we just hit 18, and that's the lowest we've seen the VIX at since like early 2022. This is the lowest we've seen the VIX since then. That's crazy. We're near 2021 levels on the VIX. This is very oversold. I think it's very likely the VIX is going to make a big reversal to the upside by, I'd say, mid-February, by the first week of February. I expect this thing to bounce very hard. I think it's very likely. This thing has been selling off and just dropping for the last few months. It needs to bounce very soon, and I think it's going to bounce hard. I also believe this is going to be correlated with the market coming down. When do I think that's going to happen? I would say as we get closer to February, up until like the first week of February, I expect a big drop. That's just my opinion. And for the QQQ, right, this thing is also pumping to the upside. We have this gap up here. Could we fill this gap? It is very possible for us to fill this gap, guys. As crazy as that sounds, I believe it still is very possible. I think we got stopped very close to gap resistance. If we fill this gap, this could be correlated with lots of tech stocks pushing up, maybe even Tesla pushing up a little bit. Maybe. But I'm going to have to break down the possibility a little bit later. Dollar index is oversold. That's going to bounce later on. There's not much to really say about that. 10-year treasury yield. We came very close to the 34 range. We could have even come down and retest and get like a bounce, forming a double bottom like pattern. That very much could happen. I'm still going to be very cautious though, regardless of that. It looks to me like the market has more room to actually push up just a little bit more before a potential reversal. Now, the last thing I want to mention is what I'm essentially seeing on the NASDAQ. On the 1 hour, I drew out this yesterday. We have this head and shoulders like formation. And I believe this thing could push up a little bit more. I think maybe this could help Tesla and Apple just a little bit before we get a big reversal to the downside. I think February is going to be a more bearish month. That's just my prediction. I think we have a little bit more room to pump before we get another big drop. That's why I mentioned the gap fill on the QQQ is still very possible. So finally, what does this all tell us about Tesla? The problem with Tesla is it doesn't always follow the market perfectly, and that's because of the fact that there's so much news that comes out about it, especially when you least expect it. I'm thinking as of right now, we're on this like uptrend. We're trying to respect this. We're going to likely retest this trend line around this 119 level. If we break below it, this thing could come all the way back down to this demand zone area right here. So I'd be very, very cautious. There's also this gap down here, right? If Tesla does end up breaking below, I'd also watch that very carefully. We have a possible head and shoulders that formed, which means this thing could break below that 119 level and then come all the way down to fill this gap. Very possible. But if that's the case, this could be a bullish setup. This could be like a bearish setup right here, the small one, within a larger bullish setup. If we do come down, there is a possibility that we have an inverse head and shoulders that's trying to form, which means we could get a small drop back down to these levels and then get a big bounce to the upside, maybe during earnings, maybe approaching earnings. Who knows when? But this is what this chart is trying to tell me. It looks just like that. So far, there's no confirmation of us breaking below 119 just yet. We actually held this trend line so far. If it does end up happening, the possibility that I mentioned is very possible. Let me draw this out one last time before I end this video. Once again, if this thing comes down, we break below this trend line, maybe another bad piece of news, who knows? And this all happens, wait, hold on. This all happens right before earnings and etc. What could happen, this is just one hypothetical, we either hold this trend line and we'd like try to bounce like this, but then we'd have to break this resistance area right here, which is around that 125. I don't know if we're going to do that. We could see something like this before we continue. But the more likely possibility that I'm watching would be like the head and shoulders that formed here, the left shoulder, the right shoulder, the head, and we get a break to the downside. But this break to the downside is setting up, right, the right shoulder of the inverse head and shoulders. Let me explain. This could also be Tesla like breaking down, retesting this, demand area. We actually break below it. Something happens. Who knows? Maybe the market comes down. Who knows? Maybe a bad piece of news. We come back down to this area, and then we slowly start to bounce, and we get a big bullish move to the upside, just like this, because of earnings or maybe approaching earnings. Tesla pumps, right? And I don't know what's going to happen after earnings, but that's just one hypothetical. I'm going to make this blue, and you could see, okay, this downtrend would be similar to this head and shoulders playing out. right? This head and shoulders leads to the downtrend. But the downtrend is also painting a giant inverse head and shoulders, which could actually pump us later. Right? It's kind of like Tesla dropping then exploding. It's very, very possible. It's just a hypothetical situation. My plan is just to put this in your mind so that you are aware of this possibility, and maybe, just maybe, it will play out. Okay. Anyways, thank you all for listening. Please have a great rest of the day. Remain calm, cool, and collected. Enjoy your weekend, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Tesla to the moon, because the long-term future is still incredibly bright. And peace out.